Hello, welcome. This is going to be Just Human, episode 350. Glad y'all are here. I have some sleepy dogs with me. Got Hercules laying down over there. He just let out a big sigh when I said that. They're having a confusing day because it's nice and rainy here in Southern Virginia. It's a little cold, a little bit windy. Not too bad. Of course, I'm from North Texas, so what they call windy here, I call a normal day. But it's the kind of weather I like the most here in Virginia, when it's cloudy and a little bit foggy in the morning and rainy, and it's fall, so the leaves are beautiful. I love these days here. But my dogs get a bit confused by it because they're half lab and they're half pit. So the lab in them wants to run outside and splash in the mud and get wet and smell all the smells, because when there's enough moisture in the air, those are the best days for labs, where they can smell all the other animals and everything. That their senses are heightened. But the pit bull terrier in them wants to avoid all the water and not get wet at all. So it's pretty funny trying to take them out and encourage them to go outside and watch. You can see a biological battle in their head where they want to do this thing, but they also don't want to. It's funny. I'm trying something new on the show. And you guys probably noticed, I've been uploading clips of this show as I was going through the recording process, and recording just segments of it on topic and then releasing those ahead of releasing this full show. And I hope people like it, because I'm liking doing that. I've released 3 clips so far, one about John Bolton, one about the Wall Street Journal fake news story, and one about Trump pardoning the Binance founder and former CEO. And the reason I'm doing this is because shorter videos just do better than these long form podcasts. But I don't want to stop doing the long form podcast. So I thought what I would do is start recording clips, just a whole segment on topic, and release those as its own thing, and then also release the full show later on. And that will allow me to have a cadence of putting out more videos. And I'm kind of doing something for everybody, where everybody, like people that like the shorter videos, are getting something, and then people that like these long videos are getting something. And as far as the recording process, it actually makes it a lot easier on me, because when I don't have to do it all in one setting. So I can sit down and be like, okay, I'm inspired, I'm going to do a recording of this topic. And then, like, that's what I'll do at that time. That's what I got. I got an hour, I got 30 minutes or whatever to do a recording. I'll do it. And I'll do it on that one topic, and then put that video out. And then when I sit down to do the full show, I'll intro the show like I'm doing now. And I'll get to the other things I hadn't got to yet. So first week of doing this, so this is the first show where I've tried to do that. And I like it, and I hope you guys like it too. So, and I know it might be a little bit confusing because you're seeing clips of a full podcast you haven't seen yet. So this is that show. This is going to be the show for those clips. So you'll get the clips first, and then the full podcast afterward. And during this episode, I'm still going to include these things that I've already put out, these little clips. I'm going to include those, but I'm also going to include more coverage of other content. So, I'm trying to put it myself in from y'all's perspective. You may not want to listen to me cover something all over again. So my thought is that I'll probably do some of these things, these clips. I'll include them towards, not all of them, but I'm going to include some of them towards the end. So basically you can watch the first part of this episode. And then if you've already watched these videos, you don't have to stick around to watch the end of the show. But I'm not too sure about that. Maybe I shouldn't do that. And I should surprise you at where they appear in the show so that you'll watch the whole episode. I don't know. I'll think on it. I'll think on how I want to deliver those things. Also, I made playlist on YouTube, and I've got one that's all of my mainline episodes, and then I've got one for United States v. Comey, one for United States v. Bolton, And then I have my clips playlist, which only has those 3 on it so far. I've tried to get the podcast thing on YouTube to work, and I'm having a little bit of trouble with it. And I'm probably just dumb. So I'll keep messing with it. I don't know how many people are using YouTube podcast, but I don't see a reason not to put things on there. So if you suddenly see a bunch of videos pop up as podcast on YouTube, that's what's going on. All right. And of course, I'm not doing any clips on my Substack, but my Substack will still get the full show. So thank you to everybody who subscribes to all those places and supports the show. My Linktree has all of my links for where to follow, where to watch, where to listen, and all the different ways to support the show. Thank you guys very much. All right. First thing we're going to do is I have a Bolton update, and then I have Comey update, and then I want to talk to you guys about the Brennan referral that Congress sent to DOJ. We're going to introduce you to a group called Scattered Spiders. I'm going to talk about Storm Shadow missiles to Ukraine and Trump trolling Putin. The Binance founder pardon. We got a new grand jury or 2 down in South Florida. There's some rumors about what those might be about. And I don't know if I'll get to the sports betting ring yet. I also want to talk to you about something I don't like, which is the Santos pardon. But first, we're going to go to the Bolton update. No, wait. Yeah. We might do let's do the Bolton update first. We'll just go in. I'm kind of a fan of alphabetical order. So I might just do alphabetical order for this whole show, because that makes me happy, which means Binance pardon should come first. You guys know I carefully plan out each one of these shows, right? You can tell, I'm sure. All right, let's go. We'll go to the first segment. Okay, got a news story here that has taken me on a ride. Yesterday, Trump pardoned actually on Wednesday of this week, Trump pardoned the Binance founder, Changpeng Zhao. And if you don't recall, Binance entered into, in November 2023, they entered into a $4.3 billion plea agreement with U.S. Department of Justice. And Binance was caught allowing their website, their exchange, to be used to traffic funds and different coins for terrorists, for human traffickers, drug traffickers, sanctioned individuals that had relations and were moving money around for Russia, Iran, Venezuela, North Korea. It was bad. And it's the largest ever of its kind plea agreement. It involved multiple U.S. agencies that were after Binance for the criminality that they were not just engaged in on the banking side, but that they were enabling and that they were participating in by being an exchange, a monetary exchange that allowed for all of these criminal organizations to transact across and to launder their money through. So this indictment was a huge deal. And it happened right after the FTX scandal and what Bankman-Fried got caught doing. And Bankman-Fried was sentenced to 25 years in prison and still is in prison. So when I saw this headline that Trump had pardoned the Binance founder, I was kind of like, WTF? What is that about? And it had me doing a bit of the Batman face here. Like, there's got to be something more going on here. There's got to be something more going on here. So I started to dig into it. And I went back and looked at that plea agreement announcement. And it's like, man, did they do everything they were supposed to do as part of this plea agreement? And I looked at what was the reasons for it. And like I said, it had to do with transactions for sanctioned countries, and it had to do with some really bad people using Binance. And Binance knew about it. It's not just that this happened and they didn't stop it. They knew that these sorts of transactions were going on, including scams various hacking groups and whatnot were using Binance as a means of transacting their extorted money that they took from people after blackmailing them with their private information and extorting industry sectors and corporations, governments. They also knew about the darknet transactions that were happening across Binance. And what they decided to do was not do anything about it. One employee said, "We need a banner on the website saying, 'Is washing drug money too hard these days? Come to Binance. We got cake for you.'" It was no secret within the company, right up to the founder, what they were doing and what they were participating in. And they willingly and intentionally made it possible for criminals to engage in this behavior and use their site. They did everything except market specifically to those criminal groups. And when Binance got in trouble with the US, they said, "Oh, we're not going to operate in the US anymore," but then they still did. They just didn't advertise that they did. And with the pardon from Trump, as part of the plea agreement, Binance was supposed to be in a multi-year, I think it's 3+ years or 3-year monitorship with DOJ and Treasury. Both of them were going to monitor Binance and they had to do certain reporting requirements, and they had to allow investigators to go and check everything to make sure they were complying with the plea agreement. But with a pardon from Trump, that monitoring program, at least on the justice side, is probably going to end. And the monitoring program on the Treasury side could also end if Trump issues an order saying for that to happen, or if Besant takes some action to terminate that monitoring program early. So far, none of this strikes me as good. None of this strikes me as something where I'm like, good move, Trump. No, it doesn't look good at all. Even worse, or what makes it look even worse, is that recently, within the past year, Binance has grown really close to the Trump family. Trump's family has a crypto entity or a business venture that's called World Liberty Financial. And Trump is on the board of it, and so are his sons, and all three of them. And they're not just having a relationship with Binance as far as business. It's a close relationship, and it's one that has enriched the Trump family. Earlier this year, a New York Times report found that the company World Finance is 60% owned by Trump, and 75% of it is of the sales of a certain type of coin on that exchange or in that company's website. The money from it goes to the Trump family. And this has meant that Trump and his family, here they are on the, oops, my thread just jumped on me. I hate it when it jumps like that. Trump and his family have been enriched by this relationship that their company they're invested in, World Liberty Financial, has with Binance, has enriched their family to the tune of over $500 million in the past year. So this pardon, a former CEO and founder of Binance, by a man who has gained over or around $500 million in wealth in the past year from Binance and the relationship that his crypto company has developed with Binance. I mean, when you put it all together, this pardon starts to look pretty bad, doesn't it? It starts to look at least unethical, if not corrupt. But I had a thought. And my thought goes back to the Batman meme here. I was reminded of Trump's relationship with the Atlantic City Casino and the FBI. And longtime viewers of my podcasts and of my readers of my threads will know that in 1981, when Trump and his family were building a casino in Atlantic City, New Jersey, they reached out to the FBI and said, hey, we want to build this casino, but we're aware that there's an organized crime problem in Atlantic City, and we would like to help the FBI fight organized crime. And the FBI became involved with the building of the Atlantic City Casino. And from at least that point in time, 1981, if not before, going back further, Trump and the FBI developed a relationship that has continued to at least 2022. Based on court filings throughout the decades, we are aware that Trump and the Trump organization are FBI assets, or at least have served as FBI assets. And many criminals have gotten caught in sting operations at Trump-owned businesses such as casinos and hotels and restaurants. And Trump himself has been a CHS, or an asset of some sort. And we know as recently as, I believe it was 2022, when a journalist sued the DOJ to try and find out who a source was in a particular criminal case. And it turned out that source was the Trump organization, because the Trump org, as recently as 2022, was an FBI asset. So it made me think, is that going on here? Is World Liberty Financial, being that it's 60% owned by a Trump org business entity, is it also functioning as a FBI asset where it's out to catch people that are mishandling crypto, who are engaged in financial crimes having to do with crypto? If that's what's going on here, then it doesn't seem so corrupt. And its appearance of being corrupt, of being some sort of corrupt or unethical pardon, aids in the cover story and aids in the appearance that you would want an asset that's out there gathering evidence on criminals to have. You wouldn't want it to be viewed as an FBI asset, of course, even though we know from careful examination of court docs over the years that it is. You would definitely want it to take on the appearance of being up for sale, up for influence, right? So I decided this could be one of those types of situations. So I continued my thread, and I continued to dig. And the more I dug into it, the less corrupt or unethical the pardon of Changping Zhao began to look. The narrative that the Trump administration is putting out, and has for a while, is that the Biden administration had a war on crypto, and that war on crypto is over because this administration is crypto friendly. The thing was, there wasn't a Biden, as far as I can tell, there was not a specific Biden DOJ and Treasury war on crypto. Instead, there was a war on transnational organized crime and terrorism and human trafficking, on dark markets and on financial maneuvers, which give lifeblood to criminal organisms. And I feel confident in that because I've tracked from the first Trump administration through the Biden administration and into this second Trump administration. I've tracked the criminal, the criminal justice efforts against these types of groups. And there is a through line, and there's a continuation from one administration to the next. And I think the war on crypto is a bit of a narrative fiction. But it's useful to say something like that if you want to catch other crypto criminals, of which there are many, 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 many. So I started looking, and I really liked this Merrick Garland quote from the announcement in the Binance plea agreement. He said, using new technology to break the law does not make you a disruptor, it makes you a criminal. Which, by the way, I'm not super into crypto, but I like Bitcoin, and I like what these new forms of securities representing what I'm about the technology side of it. I like the technology side of it. And I'm not against them at all. I am against criminals. And so is Trump. So I went and I looked at the sentencing memorandum for Zhao. And I saw that prosecutors had asked for 3 years, which is about, I mean, that's about 7.5 times less than what Samuel Bankman-Fried got with FTX, right? And yet Binance was accused of doing some really, really bad things. So I thought, just 3 years. Seems pretty kind. And then, but it hasn't been 3 years. So what happened with this? I kept digging and I kept going through the court docs and I found my first aha moment. That first aha moment came when I found out that Zhao was living, and I think still does live, in the UAE, United Arab Emirates, which is a country that does not at this time, despite our, I would say, good relationship that the U.S. has with them, an improving relationship with that country. There's no extradition agreement with the UAE and the U.S., which I got to point out, guys, there's a few people who are criminals, and, or at least sus, who are in trouble with the DOJ, who have decided to take residence in the UAE. And that's why. There's no extradition agreement. That's why they're there. The Tate brothers come to mind as one of the recent examples, but there are others. So Zhao, who lived there in the UAE, he could have remained there, guys. He could have just stayed in the UAE and be like, yeah, well, he can't get me here. But he didn't. Instead, he came to the U.S. to cooperate with law enforcement and judicial proceedings that were underway against him and his company. That was in 2022, before the plea agreement. And even before the plea agreement was inked, before it was put together, Zhao started making changes at Binance. And I found 2 pages worth right here of changes he implemented at Binance. It was at his direction prior to the plea agreement, years before it, according to the memorandum, and prior to October 2022, which is before the investigation was even fully done and the prosecution was brought, I believe. He began implementing changes. 2 pages worth. I'm not going to read them all to you, but their AML stands for anti-money laundering. So he immediately started not just cooperating in a meeting with investigators and talking to them about things, about what could change. He started making the changes. The next aha moment I had was I learned from the sentencing memorandum that Zhao brought evidence and information to the authorities at DOJ and Treasury and other U.S. law enforcement entities, including, quote, detailed analysis of complex on-platform cryptocurrency transactions. In other words, Zhao brought to the DOJ and Treasury and others evidence that was on Binance's servers of who transacted what to whom, where, when, how much, all of those things. He helped DOJ follow the money to the criminals who had been using Binance's exchange. He completely flipped. You might as well call him a DOJ asset now. And Binance agreed to continue that cooperation beyond the plea agreement. Zhao ended up being sentenced to just 4 months in prison. But going to prison was a bit risky for him because he had just provided a lot of info and evidence on multiple criminal organizations And those organizations had transacted billions, if not trillions, of dollars through Binance's exchange over the years. We're talking Italian mafia, Russian mafia, various terror groups, darknet groups, crypto scam, like every type of organized crime you can think of was using Binance. And Zhao gave their transactional data to the US DOJ. His lawyers raised the unique risk that Zhao was going to be facing in prison. And it was even more risky because he's not a U.S. citizen, which means he's not eligible for minimum security prison. And he's a multi-billionaire. He's worth something like $80 billion or something like that. I don't know what it is now. At one time, I think it was like 80 billion. He's one of the richest people in the world, obviously. So, and he turned on all these criminal organizations. So him going to prison was a huge risk, but he did so. And he was there for 4 months. And while he was in prison, Binance satisfied all of its financial penalties and forfeitures, all 4.3 billion. As of June 11th, 2025, they were done. So I'm going to restate what happened here. You see this article right here. When I first glanced at it, and maybe you too, maybe when you first saw this, I thought, what the heck? Why did he pardon this guy after what Binance was involved in? And what is this relationship that Binance has developed with Trump's own family? And you may have read about how much money, they were already rich, but how much more money the Trump family has gained, how their value has gone up by $500 million in just the past year, thanks to this relationship with Binance. And you may have assumed there's some corrupt or unethical, at the minimum, relationship going on here, and that has led to the pardoning of Changpeng Zhao. However, as you go through all of these things, what does it now look for? You kind of dot them down right here. Did Trump pardon a man who enriched his family, or whose company enriched his family by $500 million? Is that the whole story? Or is the greater part of the story Trump pardoned a man who, one, cooperated with law enforcement before there was ever a plea agreement, made appropriate enhancements to security and changes to Binance before the plea agreement was signed, entered into a plea agreement that required $4.3 billion in penalties and forfeitures to be paid, plus a dozen other changes at the company, many of which had already been implemented at Zhao's direction before the plea agreement. A man who provided law enforcement with evidence and information it needed for other investigations, and not just one or two here or there. We're talking about an innumerable number, possibly thousands of investigations could benefit from the data that Zhao turned over. We probably won't know for years because it's going to take a long time to develop those. And they're going to have to be very careful about how they go about it. And Trump pardoned a man who already served his 4-month prison sentence and who stepped down from Binance on the day that he entered that guilty plea. When you know the full story of it, that's a horse of a different color, isn't it? It comes across completely different. It doesn't seem corrupt or unethical to me, but what do you think? Knowing all of the above, does this still have the appearance of an unethical or corruptly influenced pardon? Or does it look like a situation where a pardon is actually the right thing to do? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. All right, quick update for you on what's going on with United States v. Bolton, the case against Trump's former national security advisor and a man who mishandled some classified documents in a most egregious way, while also going on TV and ridiculing President Trump for the alleged way that he somehow mishandled documents which he had the clearance to have in the first place and were packed in boxes by not him, but by the GSA, and he had nothing to do with it in the packing as they left the White House back in January of 2021. But that case was brought by Jack Smith and dismissed, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Bolton, though, hypocrite, swamp creature, he's been indicted on his mishandling and his transmission of classified documents. And I don't know if a charge can be brought for this, but I think there should be some sort of charge brought for him failing to inform the FBI that when his email account was hacked, Iran was able to get those classified documents. So I think I think an obstruction of justice charge should be brought or something. Maybe it's not necessary. Anyway, I have a quick update for you because something interesting has happened on the docket. Now, there's going to be a thing here which a lot of people are going to get outraged about. And I would not be surprised to see, and I'm kind of surprised I haven't yet seen, a bunch of articles and news clips going around trafficking in outrage bait related to what I'm about to tell you has appeared on the United States v. Bolton docket. But that's not really why I'm giving this update to you. The reason I'm giving this update to you is because in the filings, which are going to make you outraged, there's some new information about a continuing threat to Bolton, which we were not aware of. All right, so what's going on is that John Bolton has a speaking engagement in Europe that was previously scheduled. It's in early November. And when Bolton was arraigned, he, through his attorney, Abby Lowell, of Hunter Biden representation fame and many other fame, Abby Lowell is somewhat infamous for the clients he represents. He informed the judge that his client, John Bolton, already had a speaking engagement in Europe at some conference, don't know the name of it, and that he was going to seek permission for him to travel. And he's going to need the court's permission as per his release. He's going to need permission from the judge to go and do this speaking engagement. So they made the appropriate filing asking for the judge's permission. And alongside that request, they filed a sealed motion that had to do with Bolton's travel, giving them all the details of where he's going to be, who he's going to be with, where he's going to go, how he's going to get there, and when he's coming back, and all of those things, okay? But what's really interesting is that in that document, in the not non-sealed motion or memo, it says that good cause exists to allow Bolton to file this request and to file detailed information about his proposed upcoming travel and itinerary under seal. And it needs to be under seal. The good cause for it to be under seal is that Ambassador Bolton has previously been the subject of credible safety and security threats. We know this. For example, in 2022, a member of Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps was charged for attempting to arrange the murder of Ambassador Bolton. We already know that. We knew that because that is United States v. Porsafi, and you can't find Porsafi's case on the court system anymore. It's been pulled. It used to be there, but it's been pulled. It's not searchable anymore. You can find that there is a $20 million reward leading up for information that leads to the arrest or conviction of Porsafi, Shahram Porsafi, or Mehdi Rezawi, or Shaheen Pourbakhsh, which are all IRGC guys, okay? And they're all in Iran. And so we're never going to get them probably. There's a State Department $20 million reward for them, but they have been indicted. And when they were indicted, there's this press release that describes their plot to assassinate John Bolton and other people that were in the Trump administration during the time that Soleimani was killed. And there was even the complaint that gives the background on Porsafi and their scheme to assassinate Bolton either in DC or at his office or in his home in Maryland. Okay. That's not new news. That's from 2022. And what's also not new news is that there was another threat against Bolton and other members of the Trump administration, including Mike Pompeo, Mike Esper, Mark Milley, etc. And it was this guy, Asif Merchant, who was arrested last year in a setup by the FBI where they arranged for Asif Merchant. They knew he was coming to the U.S., and they arranged for him to meet with a confidential human source who pretended to be someone who could put him in contact with an assassin. And this guy was looking to contract with an assassin. This guy right here, you may remember this face. He was looking to contract that assassin who was actually an FBI undercover, or CHS. And this guy's, we're currently waiting for his trial. His trial is it's going to be in January of this year, though there might be a delay due to some things that are happening with it. And I strongly suspect that it is this case with Merchant that has helped with the case against Bolton, because all of Merchant's devices were seized. And I think his devices are what enabled FBI investigators to find the classified documents that were stolen by Iran from Bolton's email account. I'm not positive about that, but in some way, the DOJ or FBI became aware that Iran had possession of some classified documents that belonged to Bolton, and they got them from a hack of his email. And I think that hack of his email, Iran used it to get some details about not just the classified documents, but his pattern of life. A hack of your email account can tell a bad person, someone who wishes you harm, can get all sorts of information from hacking your email. And I can't help but wonder if Merchant came to the U.S. with a phone that either had on it or had access to some of the classified documents that were stolen from Bolton's AOL account that is detailed in the indictment of Bolton. Now, none of what I've told you is new news. What is new news is right here in this filing. It says Ambassador Bolton continues to face such threats and requires around-the-clock security protection. That is new. And it reminds me, you may recall, that back in January of this year, President Trump canceled Bolton's Secret Service protection, which Bolton had maintained since leaving or being fired by Trump back in 2019 or 2020? The U.S. had provided him Secret Service protection because of these ongoing threats. And the Biden administration extended that Secret Service protection over and over because of those ongoing threats. But then in January, when Trump was sworn in, Trump canceled that protection, or at least he announced that he did. Bolton was asked about this, and Bolton said, yeah, the threat remains today. And recently, someone was just arraigned for trying to assassinate Trump and me. And that's who he's talking about, is Merchant. But the funny thing about Trump announcing he was canceling Bolton's Secret Service is that the Secret Service didn't comment on whether or not it had actually been canceled. A White House spokesperson at the time didn't respond to an email seeking comment. A spokesman for Secret Service said the agency did not comment on or confirm information about its protective efforts. But Mr. Trump himself said, yep, I'm ending the Secret Service protection. And yet we have a filing here that says Bolton continues to face these threats from Iran, which that part's not surprising. But that he requires around-the-clock security protection. Now, I'm wondering if Trump announced that Bolton's protection was canceled, but it really isn't. That would be a very Trump thing to do. I'm also wondering if that's not the case and it's not the Secret Service who's protecting Bolton, then Is Bolton paying round-the-clock security for himself? That's pricey. The other thing I'm wondering is, who else has protection right now because of that? Because if Bolton is still under threat from Iran assassination plots, then I would think that Esper, Milley, Pompeo, O'Brien, and others still are as well. And that's pretty interesting. I doubt very much that Iran would give up on getting revenge against members of the Trump administration, including Trump himself, which Asif Merchant was interested in trying to arrange for the assassination of Trump, but the other targets were more, obviously, would be more reachable, except for during the campaign. This was, remember, Iran also hacked members of the Trump campaign's email accounts last year during the campaign election season. So these ongoing threats, which haven't made as much news really at all, according to this filing, they still exist. And I have to wonder if, well, I have to assume that Iran's ability to conduct such operations is severely degraded thanks to the short war that Israel engaged in and the military operation against Iran that the U.S. engaged in earlier this year. That doesn't mean they're going to give up. Radical Islam has a way of holding a grudge for centuries and upon centuries. So I think this threat will probably always exist, even if their capabilities are degraded. Now, here's for the thing you're going to get outraged about. A magistrate judge granted Bolton's request to travel to Europe next month. Go ahead and get outraged. Go ahead and have your moment. Curse his name. Curse the court system. Go ahead. Get it out of your system. Are you ready? Are you finished? Now let me ask you. Did you feel the same way when Trump was under indictment last year? Did you want President Trump's travel restricted when he was under indictment from Jack Smith for the documents case and the J6 election case and the Manhattan case and the Georgia case? Did you feel at that time or believe that Trump's travel should be restricted due to those ongoing criminal cases? What's the difference? Sometimes you got to check your bias on this stuff, right? This is one of those times where there's this immediate temptation to be outraged because, Bolton, why are they going to let him travel? He won't come back, But if it said United States v. Trump, and Trump had a speaking engagement in Europe next month and all these things, and it was still 2023 or 2024, and Trump filed under seal his detailed travel plan with the court, and Trump sought permission from the court to travel for that speaking engagement, and a magistrate judge granted that request, would you feel the same way? Think on it. Got to check your biases, right? All right, so a few days ago, Congress recommended former director of the CIA, John Brennan, for prosecution. They sent a referral memo over to DOJ, and we're going to take a look at that here in a minute. But first, we're going to back up and take a look at some news that preceded this. And I'm just going to go ahead and say, I'm not too confident that this is going to result in Brennan being charged. First, you may remember that in July, about July 8th or so, the FBI, it leaked out, through Brooke Singman. She seems to get a lot of leads over at FBI and DNI, and she seems to be pretty tight with some people in the Trump administration. Not alleging anything nefarious there. I'm just saying she tends to get tipped off on some hot stories. FBI launched a criminal investigation of John Brennan and James Comey, according to DOJ sources who are speaking to Brooke here. And in this article, which we covered on a previous episode of this show over the summer, it focused on Brennan and Brennan misleading Congress. And CIA Director John Ratcliffe, who used to be the DNI, referred evidence of wrongdoing by Brennan to FBI Director Kash Patel for potential prosecution. Now, this is different than what Congress did. And I think this is important to note. There's already been a criminal referral on John Brennan that was issued to the to FBI. And that came from current CIA Director John Ratcliffe. And that's went to FBI. And as far as we know, it's still at FBI. And the FBI is still investigating Brennan. Maybe DOJ has it. I'm hoping so. But what's happened with Congress over the past week is Congress has referred Director Brennan for misleading Congress in testimony several years ago, but they referred it to DOJ. So we have two referrals on Brennan that we're talking about here, two criminal referrals. They're not the same. And one of them we know of from the summer. One of them just happened last week, October 21st or thereabout. Okay. And theirs goes to the AG, to AG Bondi. Now, around the time that we got this news story about Brennan and Comey being under investigation, which it's proved true that Comey was under criminal investigation, and now we have that indictment. And in episode 350, I have some notable updates on the Comey case. We don't yet have a criminal case that's been unsealed against John Brennan, but we did have declassified and publicized over the summer, around the time that this news broke, several documents from DNI Gabbard, the current director of national intelligence. She gave us this review of the ICA, the 2016 ICA. And the 2016 ICA is what both of these referrals are having to do with. It's Brennan's test. The one from Ratcliffe has to do with the actual structure and process and use of the ICA as weaponized intelligence against the incoming, at that time, the incoming president, Donald Trump, for his first term. That ICA came out on January 6th. It was rushed into production. There were tons of problems with it. The CIA, like line employees and analysts in the CIA, disagreed with the construction and some of the words used in the ICA. Comey over at FBI disagreed with the ICA and actually pulled the FBI out of it. But then it got put back in, and Deputy Director McCabe, is the one who seemed to spearhead the FBI's involvement in the final version of the ICA. NSA director at the time, Mike Rogers, had a lot of concern, and so did his employees, about the ICA and about having enough time to do a thorough and high integrity job with the product that the president had tasked them to produce. And it was John Brennan and currently who was at CIA, and it was the then DNI director, John Clapper, who seemed to be, as far as the documents we got, these emails that we got over the summer and the communications between them, they seem to be, remember these emails that we got, about 104, well, there's 70 something pages of emails, and then there's a declassified version of the ICA here. And it's all these different drafts of the ICA going back and forth, and emails about the words they're going to use and how they're going to massage the language and how they're reaching the conclusions and when it's actually going to be produced. They wanted it January 3rd, then it got pushed, and over the holidays, the DNI Clapper expected everybody to work through the holidays of Christmas and New Year's to get this done so they could publish it January 3rd. It ended up coming out on January 6th. And what you see in these documents is very important in these emails. The back and forth is very important here. And some of that back and forth was summarized in this oversight investigation and referral that the House did back in September 2020. And this is where we start to get a picture of Brennan's role. Brennan disagreed, or at least didn't see eye to eye with his actual employees at the ICA. The director ordered the post-election publication of 15 reports containing previously collected but unpublished intelligence, 3 of which were substandard. And he kept pushing this substandard intel, or these reports that hadn't gone through the verification process and were not handled the way they should have been handled. He ended up picked 5 CIA analysts to write the ICA and rushed its production in order to publish 2 weeks before President-elect Trump was sworn in. That was their goal. They wanted this done before Trump took office so they could set the tone for his entire presidency and try and undermine it as him being Putin's puppet or Russia throwing the election to Trump. They wanted to add more fuel to the fire, to quote from, or oil to the fire, to quote from the Russian memoranda that we got from Durham's report. DNI Clapper and director of CIA, John Brennan, were the main pushers here, okay? And you see that in the emails. You see that in the review here. Now, this is the testimony in question that has to do, again, the original referral, the original criminal referral that happened this summer from the current director of CIA, John Ratcliffe, has to do with the weaponization of intelligence. It has to do with how the ICA was handled, how it was constructed, how it was pushed, how things appeared in it that should not have appeared in it, verbiage appeared in it that shouldn't have appeared in it. And for a more granular overview of that, I went through this document over the summer. And if you guys want, I'll go through it again in more detail because it really does give us a lot of insight into the ICA and the background of it. And it's probably going to be very useful in any indictment of Brennan that is to come, which I think there will be one, by the way. But this is what the House has referred for prosecution. This is the issue right here. This questioning back in Congress from, I don't know, it's like 6 years ago. This is Brennan like 6 years ago. Maybe it's 7 years ago. I'm sorry, I'm slipping on the date. This is what he says while being questioned, okay? Oops, I should probably turn y'all's audio on. Trey Gowdy's a little hard to hear, so I'm going to up the audio just a bit.
Steele dossier?
I don't.
Do you know if the FBI paid for any portion of the Steele dossier?
I don't know. I know that there are press reports related to that, but I don't know. I have no firsthand knowledge of that.
Do you know whether any of the underlying allegations made in the Steele dossier were ever tested, probed, examined, cross-examined, whether the sources were examined for reliability, credibility?
I know that there were efforts made by the Bureau to try to understand whether or not any of the information in that was valid, but I don't have any firsthand knowledge of it.
Do you know if the Bureau ever relied on the Steele dossier as part of any court filings, applications, petitions, pleadings?
I have no awareness.
Did the CIA rely on it?
No.
Why not?
Because we didn't. It wasn't part of the corpus of intelligence information that we had. It was not in any way used as a basis for the intelligence community assessment that was done. It was not.
Now we'll go and take a look at the referral. And in that testimony, Gowdy is asking Brennan about the Steele dossier. And Brennan is saying, no, we didn't use it, the CIA. We didn't base our ICA construct. It wasn't part of our analysis. It's an FBI thing. I'm not aware of what the FBI was doing with it. Now, here's what the referral says. It's to Pam Bondi, and it says, we write to refer significant evidence that former Director of Central Intelligence John Brennan knowingly made false statements during his transcribed interview before the committee on May 11th, 2023. While testifying, Brennan made numerous willfully and intentionally false statements of material fact contradicted by the record established by the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence. By the way, this is testimony from May 11th, 2023. That's not the video you just saw, but they're going to bring that video up later in that referral, or in this referral. All right, so it's an 18 U.S.C. 1001 charge because they're saying he knowingly and willfully made false statements to Congress. Brennan falsely denied that the CIA relied on the discredited Steele dossier in drafting the post-election intelligence community assessment. On January 6, 2017, CIA, FBI, and NSA published a declassified version of the ICA, which was titled Assessing Russian Activities and Intentions in Recent U.S. Elections. The ICA stated, among other things, that Russia, quote, developed a clear preference for President Trump and, quote, aspired to help him win the election. This conclusion, now known to be false, was based in part on the Steele dossier, which, quote, was referenced in the ICA main body text and further detailed in the 2-page ICA annex. The Steele dossier, it's a series of reports from Christopher Steele, which was really opposition research purchased by the Hillary Clinton campaign from Fusion GPS, and it was a bunch of derogatory information about Trump. And you guys know about this because we're all Durham junkies here, right? In July 2025, the Trump administration declassified numerous documents showing the ICA's main findings were false and that the Obama administration knowingly fabricated the findings for the purpose of undermining the Trump administration. That is this here that was declassified that we've looked at before, and all of these right here that we've looked at, among other documents that were declassified over the summer. The newly declassified evidence also confirms that Brennan falsely stated to the committee during a transcribed interview on May 11th, 2023, he stated, quote, the CIA was not involved at all with the Steele dossier. They're saying that that is a false statement, okay? The question goes, Mr. Gates asked Brennan, all right, so the fact that DNC was providing the financing for the Steele dossier's development doesn't give you concern that it might be partisan? Brennan replies, again, that was happening back in 2016. I understand how you were able to tie this to my reference to my expertise, but I don't see how any relevance to the Hunter Biden laptop issue now. And that's what they were talking about that time, was the Hunter Biden laptop issue, because Brennan Sidon was one of the 51 people that signed the letter that Hunter Biden laptop was Russian propaganda, disinformation, right? Gates responds, well, you said that you signed this letter, the 51 intelligence professionals letter, that we now acknowledge Joe Biden misused in a debate to fool the American public because you're this great Russia expert. So I'm trying to understand your Russia expertise. And you were involved in analyzing this information. By the way, it doesn't really help that Gates is the person asking these questions for what should be obvious reasons. Brennan replied, no, I was not involved in analyzing the dossier at all. I said the first time I actually saw it, it was after the election, and the CIA was not involved at all with the dossier. You can direct that to the FBI and to others. Gates asked, were you aware of the FBI's involvement with the dossier? Brennan says, yes, because there's an annex to the ICA, the Intelligence Community Assessment, that the Bureau asked to be included in there. It was their purview, their area, not ours. Now, a report drafted by the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence 2017 and recently declassified shows Brennan's testimony to be false. According to the report, the ICA included supporting evidence for the ICA's false claim that Russia aspired to help President Trump win the election. The report directed the reader to review Annex A for additional reporting from an FBI source on Russian influence efforts. Christopher Steele. Annex A, which was only included in the highest classified version of the ICA, was a 2-page summary of the Steele dossier, along with, quote, some analysis that struggled to imply that some dossier findings might have been corroborated by intelligence. The CIA officer who served as the lead author of the ICA told the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence that he drafted Annex A in coordination with the FBI. Ultimately, according to documents declassified by the Trump admin, the decision to incorporate information from Steele in the dossier, quote, was jointly made by the directors of CIA and FBI. A senior FBI analyst confirmed this fact, telling the HPSCI that after debating for several days whether to include information from the dossier, upper levels at FBI and CIA decided to put it in. And we see some of that back and forth in these emails here. Brennan's assertion that the ICA was not involved at all with the Steele dossier cannot be reconciled with the facts. As the newly declassified documents show, a CIA officer drafted the annex containing a summary of the dossier. Brennan made the ultimate decision, along with then FBI Director James Comey, to include information from the dossier in the ICA. And as discussed further below, Brennan overruled senior CIA officers who objected to the inclusion of the dossier material. We also see those discussions in these emails. So they're saying right here that it's a lie. Brennan's assertion that the CIA was not involved at all with the dossier, that's a false statement. That's number one. Number two, Brennan falsely testified when he told the committee that the CIA opposed including the Steele dossier in the ICA. Brennan testified that, quote, the CIA was very much opposed to having any reference or inclusion of the Steele dossier in the intelligence community assessment. He testified, Chairman Jordan asked him, who did you learn about the Steele dossier from? How did you learn about the dossier in December? That'd be December 2016. Brennan replied, I received a copy of it from the FBI when they were wanting to have a summary of the document attached to the intelligence community assessment that was done. This was before we went to Trump Tower and briefed Donald Trump when Jim Comey was going to talk to Donald Trump about the contents of the dossier. And the CIA was very much opposed to having any reference or inclusion of the Steele dossier in the intelligence community assessment. And so they sent over a copy of the dossier to say that this was going to be separate from the rest of that assessment. And that's when the CIA was given formal access to it. According to this referral, this claim by Brennan is contradicted by multiple sources that reveal Brennan's support for including the dossier in the ICA. According to a CIA memorandum declassified by the Trump admin, when two CIA Mission Center leaders confronted Brennan with specific flaws in the dossier, Brennan disregarded their concerns, quote, appearing more swayed by the dossier's general conformity with existing theories than by legitimate tradecraft concerns, end quote. Brennan later formalized his position in writing, stating that, quote, my bottom line is that I believe that the information warrants inclusion in the report. Similarly, HPSCI report notes that when senior CIA officers demanded that Brennan remove the Steele dossier from the ICA, Brennan, quote unquote, refused to remove it. When the officers presented evidence of the dossier's many flaws, Brennan responded, yes, but doesn't it ring true? Ultimately, Brennan had to order the dossier included over the objections of CIA professionals. As the newly declassified documents demonstrate, Brennan eagerly wanted to include the Steele dossier in the ICA, a fact Brennan himself documented in writing. This directly contradicts Brennan's testimony that the CIA was very much opposed to having any reference or inclusion of the Steele dossier in the ICA, because as director of the CIA, Brennan spoke for the agency. So the lie here, the second lie that they're referring him on, is when he stated to Congress the CIA was very much opposed to having any reference or inclusion of the Steele dossier in the intelligence assessment. When in fact, Brennan was forceful in making sure that it was in there. Now, the third lie is the one we just watched a video of. Brennan has provided false testimony during the HPSCI hearing. This was on May 23rd, 2017. Brennan testified before the HPSCI in an open hearing titled Russian Active Measures during the 2016 campaign. During the hearing, Brennan falsely asserted that the Steele dossier, quote, was not in any way used as a basis for the intelligence community assessment that was done. Although this statement was made beyond the 5-year statute of limitations, it indicates a pattern of Brennan's willingness to lie to Congress. And then they quote from the exchange we just heard, and they say it's a lie because we're right here where Brennan says the Steele dossier wasn't part of the corpus of intelligence information that we had. It was not in any way used as a basis for the intelligence community assessment that was done. It was not. So they refer, there's one that they can't charge, but the other two, they say, are false testimony. And Jim Jordan and Comer and the others have referred, I've sent a criminal referral on this to DOJ. Now, why am I not impressed with this? Let's go from the bottom to the top. This statement right here is literally true. The Steele dossier was not part of the corpus of intelligence that the CIA had. The FBI had it. The Steele dossier came to the FBI from someone who was an asset to the FBI, a CHS, Christopher Steele. And it arrived sometime in late summer of 2016 at the New York field office. And Charles McGonigal may have been the first person or one of the first people to actually get looks at it. But it was an FBI thing. The Steele dossier came to the FBI. If you remember the Russia memoranda, it talked about motivating the FBI to put oil on the fire. The Steele dossier does just that. It was when he says that that was the FBI's purview in another part of his testimony, he's right. The Steele dossier didn't go to the CIA for them to analyze. It went to the FBI for them to analyze, hoping to spur on an investigation of Trump and for that to become public so that it would damage his election chances and distract from Hillary Clinton's email server investigation, right? So when Brennan says, or when Brennan's asked, did the CIA rely on the Steele dossier? Brennan says no, and he's telling the truth. Right here, where Gowdy's first question says, do you know if the Bureau, meaning the FBI, ever relied on the Steele dossier as part of court filings, applications, petitions, or pleadings? He's talking about FISA. And he's talking about the Steele dossier being used to get FISA warrants on Carter Page, Mike Flynn, and others. But Brennan has no awareness of that. He's over at the CIA. Then Gowdy asked, did the CIA rely on the Steele dossier? He says no. Well, why not? Well, because we didn't. It wasn't part of the information that we had. It was not in any way used as a basis for the intelligence community assessment that was done. It was not. It was at the last moment as the ICA was being rushed to put together. Remember, they put together an ICA initially that was ready earlier in December. And Obama was like, no, this isn't it doesn't say what I want it to say. So he tasked them to produce a new ICA that focused on Russia influence and manipulation efforts of the election in order to help cast the narrative and support an ongoing investigation into the incoming Trump administration and to damage it before it was even sworn in, to bring everything it did into question. This referral for this statement here by Brennan doesn't work, guys, because it's the literal truth. The CIA, if you go through these exchanges, the CIA is doing their own analysis apart from the ICA, which they didn't have. They didn't have the Steele dossier. So how could they have used it as a basis for their version of the ICA or their section? Remember, the ICA group collab. It's a group project between NSA, CIA, and FBI. It's a group project that they're all working on together, and the DNI is there organizing it, and they got to get it done as quickly as possible. And so the FBI is doing their version of it, and the NSA is doing their version and looking at their intelligence of it, and the CIA is doing theirs. They don't all have the same data set. They don't all have the same sources. They don't all have the same intelligence. Now, the second one, right here, which this was, the first one I dealt with wasn't even a referral, but you'll see where I'm going with this, I think. Brennan falsely stated, this is the second item which actually is criminally referred. Brennan falsely testified when he told the committee that the ICA opposed including the Steele dossier. Well, that's literally true. The CIA was very much opposed to having any reference or inclusion of the Steele dossier in the intelligence community assessment. That's true. It was Director Brennan who was not opposed, but the CIA itself was opposed. And the analyst in this, that's why Brennan had to strong arm them to include it. They didn't want to put it in there. They're like, we don't, I'm not a big fan of this. That's why Brennan had to come in and say, no, it's going to be included, which they put in here. Brennan, it says right here, when two CIA Mission Center leaders confronted Brennan with the specific flaws in the dossier, Brennan disregarded their concerns, appearing more swayed by the dossier's general conformity with existing theories than by legitimate tradecraft concerns. Right. It's in this document right here. One of the CIA's lead authors expressed surprise that the review process had resulted in so few changes was unusual for such a lengthy, complex, and high-profile assessment. The NIO for Russia, National Intelligence Officer for Russia, who only received the final draft for a few hours before it was published, noted that they needed more time, and with more time, more could be done, and they could make a more elegant presentation. Let's go right. The CIA drafters, right here. There was uneven access to highly compartmented information, and that further complicated coordination and review and contributed to analytical differences on the ICA's contentious point, or most contentious point. The product spanned multiple CIA and NSA compartments and included restricted access FBI information, with some reporting touching on U.S. persons. Multiple ICA participants had access to intelligence that others did not. This restricted the author's ability to collaborate with a large pool of colleagues. Central to the judgment that Putin, quote, aspired to help Trump win was one highly classified CIA report. Brennan had tightly restricted access to this information within the CIA. It had been collected in July, but not disseminated in CIA serialized reporting until the week of 19th of December. The CIA drafters had enjoyed privileged access to this information through participation in a highly compartmented analytical effort known as a fusion cell, which Brennan had created in July to focus on the IC's growing concern about Russian election interference. However, most ICA contributors, coordinators, and reviewers were only read in to the sensitive reporting at the 19th December coordination meeting. One CIA manager stated that uneven access to compartmented information among ICA coordinators and reviewers contributed to an already chaotic process. He said some key analysts and managers were not cleared to review the ICA's most controversial aspects and were only able to see portions of the draft out of context. Broader access to reporting, both prior to and throughout the preparation of the ICA, almost certainly would have led to a more robust analytic debate. Even within the small circle, the most sensitive information, the judgment that Putin, quote, aspired to help Trump win, prompted healthy and protracted debate, including more voices with more time to weigh in undoubtedly would have refined, challenged, or surfaced analytical differences on these questions. A DNI report in 2017 indicated that the highest classified version of the ICA had been shared with more than 200 U.S. officials. This is unusual for such a highly compartmented product and calls into question whether the extreme limitations on access to underlying intelligence within the IC during the ICA's preparation was justifiable. They held the ball close. They held this way too close until it was too late, and that was purposeful. That kind of didn't help make my point. Well, I mean, it does, but it didn't, not directly what I wanted to get to. Right. In an email exchange on the 20th December, the deputy director for the CIA, David Cohen, informed Brennan that the principal deputy director for national intelligence had called to register a concern with the process of putting together the ICA. According to Cohen, that principal deputy director characterized the CIA's plan to deliver a final draft on the date was to be published as a fait accompli. They would jam them both substantively and temporally. Brennan downplayed the concern, responding to Cohen that the big three, meaning the CIA, FBI, and NSA, have every right to agree on language that will be included verbatim in the final version. Acknowledging that the ICA would still have a right to differ, and I very much hope that doesn't happen. The decision by agency heads to include the Steele dossier in the ICA ran counter to fundamental tradecraft principles and ultimately undermined the credibility of the judgment, the key judgment. The ICA authors first learned of the dossier. It's right here, guys. The ICA authors first learned of the dossier and FBI leadership's insistence on its inclusion on 20th December, the same day the largely coordinated draft was entering the review process at CIA. FBI leadership made it clear that their participation in the ICA hinged on the dossier's inclusion, and over the next few days repeatedly pushed to weave references to it throughout the main body of the ICA. The ICA authors and multiple senior CIA managers, including 2 senior leaders of CIA Mission Center responsible for Russia, strongly opposed including the dossier, asserting that it did not meet even the most basic tradecraft standards. The CIA's Deputy Director for Analysis warned in an email to Brennan on 29th December that including it in any form risked the credibility of the entire paper. But Brennan wanted it in. And you look in these emails that we have. Let's see, that's September. Let me look at the up here. I don't remember if I can control F this document. I think I can control F. There's December 7th, 03. December 7th and 8th, lots of emails going back and forth. And now remember this right here. Before this happens, 8th December, there's a back and forth happening because the FBI is going to pull out. The only it says right here, the only difference that I was aware of between FBI and INA over this transparently developed product was over confidence level on the attribution, which we have adjusted to the FBI's view upon review of the recent redacted collection. I bet that's dossier. Rather than drafting a dissent, perhaps FBI could share their concerns with the most recent draft. I think it goes without saying that the presidential daily brief should not go forward until the FBI has done so. FBI decides on December 8th that they're going to draft a dissent. Please remove our seal and annotations of co-authorship. If I remember right, it's redacted here, but if I remember right, this is from Comey. I'm not positive though. But on the 8th December, the FBI is pulling out of the ICA. They don't want to be seen as co-author of it. We have received so far responses from blah, blah. Please provide coordination. Da, da, da. Due to high administration interest, meaning Obama administration interest, this piece is now scheduled to run tomorrow. Therefore, we now ask that coordination responses be sent by 2 p.m. Go to the next. I want to find December 20th. Based on new guidance, this is shortly after the FBI pulled out. Based on new guidance, we are going to push back publication of the presidential daily brief. They want everybody in unison saying, hey, Russia prefers Trump. Now look right here, National Security Council, dated December 9th, 2016. Summary of conclusions from the Principals Committee meeting on a sensitive topic. Look who's there. Susan Rice, John Kerry, Victoria Nuland, Adam Sussman, Brian Mekion, Loretta Lynch, Mary McCord, Jay Johnson, Rob Silvers, Chris McDonough, Mayor Bitar, Neil Eggleston, James Clapper, Andrew McCabe, not James Comey, Andrew McCabe, John Brennan, General Joseph Dunford, Richard Leggett, Avril Haines, Lisa Monaco, Ben Rhodes, and then from the NSC, all of these wankers. This is where they set the message of this is what it's going to conclude. This is what we want the takeaway to be of the ICA. Okay, let me get back. December comes up more than I expected it to. December 9th, let me get December 12th. DNI. This is them coordinating on a timeline. They got their conclusions. They drafted their conclusions. Now they just want to put together the product that backs up the conclusions they already reached. Because it's all about what the top people, what the leadership wanted it to say, not what the analyst actually produced, not what their actual assessment was. And then there's a draft version of it in these documents. I want to see. I think this was the document that had this one email from Brennan. It might not be. We had a lot of emails declassed over the summer, and I may be misremembering. Yep, I don't think it is, because this goes, now it suddenly jumped back to September, or jumped forward to September 2019, talking about a FOIA on this stuff. Okay, let me go back to the referral. Okay, so the problem with this right here is that when Brennan says the CIA was opposed to having any reference of or inclusion of the Steele dossier, he's telling the truth. The analyst, the 5 people and their team working under them, Director CIA picked 5 analysts to write the ICA and rushed its production. Those people didn't want it in. And James Comey pulled the FBI out because they weren't happy with the way the ICA was being put together. But then they had that meeting. Then this meeting happened of the National Security Council with all of these people. This Principals Committee meeting. And they decided, nope, we got to have a new ICA. Screw the presidential daily brief. We're going to have a new ICA, and it's going to conclude that Russia aspired to help Trump win the election, even though that's not what the analysts are telling us. Next one, which is really the first one in the referral. They say that Brennan lied because he stated that the CIA was not involved with the dossier and that it was the FBI's purview, their area, not ours. Well, as I already told you, that's literally true. And the Steele dossier came in at the very, very last minute. And the people putting together the ICA and writing it and doing the analysis and all those things, They didn't have access to the dossier until the very final days, when suddenly the FBI, meaning McCabe, was like, this has to be included. We have to include it, and we have to quote it in the ICA. Now, I'm telling you guys all this not because I like John Brennan. I don't. Please don't consider what I'm saying to be a defense of John Brennan. I'm going through all this to tell you that when John Brennan is there testifying, and he's saying that the dossier wasn't a CIA, wasn't part of our corpus of intelligence, I think he's telling the truth. And when he's saying that the CIA didn't want the Steele dossier in the ICA, I think he's telling the truth, because his analysts didn't want it in, and his analysts didn't arrive at their conclusions based on the Steele dossier. So these two lies that Congress has referred to DOJ for this man right here, saying he lied to their committees in May of 2017, one, which is past statute of limitations, and then 2 times in May of 2023. I don't think they're going to hold up very well under scrutiny. And maybe DOJ brings charges based on them, but I'm not so sure. Now, I'm sorry to give you guys that bad news, but this is how we have to look at these things. He didn't say I. If he had said I didn't rely on or consider the Steele dossier, or I didn't use the Steele dossier, he would be lying. If he said that I didn't want the Steele dossier included in the ICA, he would be lying. But that's not what he said. He said the CIA didn't, meaning as an entity, as an agency. And he's right about that. And the emails show that they didn't, and he pushed it in. And even their referral includes that information, that it was him, John Brennan, pushing for these to be included. Now, here's the good news, though. I think this does have legs. I think the referral that John Ratcliffe sent to the FBI several months ago is the referral to watch, and the referral that could lead to some criminal charges, not for false statements to Congress, but for weaponizing the intelligence against the incoming administration. And I think that what might be going on, folks, is that Congress knows that. Never underestimate the appetite of members of Congress to share in the limelight of someone else and to take credit for things they didn't necessarily accomplish or bring forth. And I think that this right here, I think there's something coming against John Brennan. And I think it has to do with the referral from CIA Director John Ratcliffe. And I think Congress suspects or knows that that's coming. And so they came up with their own referrals so that they could share a little bit in the limelight and could say, we helped. Is that a bit cynical of me? Maybe. But it's on brand for Congress, is it not? I think it's on brand. And I think that's what's going on here. Because this referral of Brennan, it's too iffy. It's too shaky. What Brennan can do here is state the literal truth and use the very documents that they're citing here to defend himself and say, yeah, when I referred to the CIA as not wanting it in, I was referring to the CIA and its employees and the people actually working on the ICA. And when I said that it wasn't part of our purview or the CIA's purview, that it was the FBI's, yeah, that was true. I wanted it in. And then he can defend that, but he's not charged with that. Not here, anyway. It's not referred to here. But here, that'd be a little different. I hope that makes sense. I know I spent a long time picking that apart, but this stuff matters, and it's one of several things where we got D-class on this topic, and now there's referrals, or there were referrals at that time, and more D-class has happened. All the D-class that we saw over the summer, it's feeding into criminal cases that actually end up materializing, right? Whether it's Comey or it's Bolton or it's Brennan, maybe Clapper soon, and others. It seems like it's all what we got D-class on seems to be intentional that we got that specific D-class ahead of indictments. And that's really exciting. All right, next up, we have some updates in United States v. Comey. First, and this is from a few days ago, the defense's motion to dismiss based on unlawful appointment of Lindsay Halligan is going to be handled by South Carolina District Judge Cameron McGowan Curry, who is pretty old. I think he's in his 70s. And he's also going to be handling the motion to dismiss based on unlawful appointment that Letitia James filed in the Eastern District of Virginia in her case. And because they're both dealing with the appointment, I think he's going to get both of those. And we'll see what happens with them. I actually think that they have a pretty strong chance because I don't really see how Lindsay Halligan's appointment is lawful. I don't think it's lawful, but that doesn't mean that these cases are pointless. I think I'll get to why I don't think they're pointless here in a minute. But he's going to handle it, and it's going to be in early November. It's when the hearing, I believe it's on the same day. I want to say it's November 13th, maybe, is the day that he's going to have a in-person hearing for both James Comey and Letitia James. Not positive on that, but I know it's in early November. And for those, and right here, as you can see, this judge was appointed way back March 11th, 1994, by then President Bill Clinton. So happy Re-Day for all of those who celebrate. Now, more interestingly, there's been a new filing over the weekend or on Monday sometime. Not really sure because everything on Pacer is delayed because of the Pacer hack and all the fallout from it. F you, Russia, and F you, all of these groups who have been hacking Pacer. God, it's frustrating. United States v. Comey. As expected, defense has filed an opposition to using a filter team for Arctic haze evidence that was seized years ago from Daniel Richman, who was then counsel to James Comey and is now person 3 from the indictment against James Comey. The defense team wants to first challenge the underlying search warrants used to get that evidence, which we've talked about in a previous episode covering updates in Comey's case. And that evidence appears to be communications between Comey and Richman. To do that, they need prosecutors to turn over what we now know were 4 search warrants that were used in Arctic haze to go after these communications. Defense's filings in this, they give us some insight into the Arctic haze investigation, and in my opinion, they foreshadow what this case is really about, which is sealed material and getting it unsealed. That's why I say these cases, even though I think they're gonna, I don't know about Letitia James, but I think Comey's case is going to fall apart. And in some sense, I think of the motion to dismiss for unlawful appointment. I think of it as the kill switch. It's a built-in kill switch to this case. And I think it was intentionally put there. Well, maybe not like all kill switches. It depends on the engineer, right? Some kill switches are not intentional. All right. So here's their opposition. I'm just going to take you through it, my thread on it anyway. I'm not going to take you through the whole filing. A filter team is needed for a set of evidence, okay, that was seized per search warrants on one of Comey's attorneys, Daniel Richman, who's person 3 in the indictment. And it all stems from the Arctic haze investigation. And the Arctic haze investigation was one of several media leak investigations. Thank you for this chart, Cody Cody put this together a while back, and I love it because it ties together all of them with their dates and what they were about and who the journalists they targeted were. There was Arctic Haze, Echo's Fate, Foggy Falls, Genetic Christmas. The Schiff whistleblower is thrown in there, although that wasn't, it's a media leak investigation. Riding Hood, it was Siren's Lure, and Tropic Vortex. These were all media leak investigations, many of which started while Comey was still director of the FBI. Some of them started after he was gone. Arctic Haze is the one we're concerned about. Arctic Haze is the one that went after whoever gave classified information to the New York Times for this article. Comey tried to shield the FBI from politics, then he shaped an election. In this article, Daniel Richman is quoted. He is named as a source for much of what's in the article. The classified information that appears in this article relates to the Renteria memo and the Russian reports. Remember, the Durham classified annex was declassified this summer, and we learned a lot about those Russian reports. There's a section in this article that deals with them, and it talks about a document obtained by the FBI reinforced the idea in Comey's mind that DOJ was not interested in prosecuting a case against Hillary Clinton. And this memo that's at issue here and an email was written by Amanda Renteria, which says or assures a person from the Soros Society, the Open Society Foundation, I should say, Bernardo, that who was hacked by the Russians, that A.G. Lynch isn't going to let the investigation into Secretary Clinton go too far. Remember that? The seized material in the Arctic Haze investigation is quarantined at this time, meaning neither the prosecution or the defense can look at it, or they're not supposed to. A filter team would be used to screen that evidence for material that may be potentially attorney-client privileged, which all or most of it is going to be privileged, or initially it's going to be claimed to be privileged because it's communications between Comey and his lawyer, who is person 3 in the indictment in this case, Daniel Richman. Now, this is one of my favorite parts of the whole filing. It says, the government has no lawful basis to review material obtained more than 5 years ago in a closed investigation, meaning Arctic Haze, that ended without any charges pursuant to stale warrants for separate offenses, including materials that remain under seal by another court. Folks, I believe we call this foreshadowing in the biz, because why are they bringing that up? Why are they bringing that up? As part of the Arctic Haze investigation, Comey provided his iPhone to the FBI. On it were 4 voicemail messages, 4 instant messages, 2 email messages, and 51 images from December 1st, 2016 to May 1st, 2017. But according to the Arctic investigation memos, none of that material contained information relevant to the Arctic Haze investigation. I wonder if it was relevant to any other investigation or will be. If it will become relevant to an investigation. They took other investigative steps in Arctic Haze. They searched all the FBI hardline phone. Remember, they're looking for a leaker. They searched all FBI hardline phone and email records for contacts with known reporter facilities, also known as spin searches. They reviewed those spin searches. They obtained and reviewed a multitude of telephone records on FBI cellular and work phones for FBI employees in the subject pool, including text messages. They took 3 redacted steps that we don't know what they are. They analyzed handwritten notes taken by FBI employees. They analyzed thousands of documents and other items of evidence, redacted. Reviewed administrative and classified materials, redacted. Reviewed 3 reports issued by the U.S. DOJ OIG, reviewed FBI 302s of DOJ and FBI witnesses provided by the Office of Special Counsel Mueller, reviewed a 2017 investigation conducted by John Durham, which was Tropic Vortex, interviewed numerous current and former FBI, DOJ, and U.S. intelligence community employees who had access to the classified information that leaked in that New York Times article, and then they took 2 more redacted steps that we don't know about. Arctic Haze went through all of that and charged nobody. In fact, they concluded that based on everything we've gathered, there's no more investigative leads to follow, and there's not enough evidence to charge either Richmond or Comey or anyone else with leaking classified information to the New York Times, or with any crime, actually is what it said, with any crime. Back to Comey's new filing. Defense wants the government's motion for a filter team denied. But they want it denied without prejudice. They don't oppose the filter team protocol. They oppose implementing it before the government identifies a valid legal basis for its search and fully discloses the scope of the materials it seeks to review. So, that's consistent with what they said about 2 weeks ago in a different filing. It's also consistent with what they told prosecution when prosecution approached them about the motion for a filter team. We learn in this filing that Arctic Haze had 4 warrants, but we don't learn much about them. It tells us that they exist. It describes them, but it's all redacted in this new filing, and it's redacted out of an abundance of caution because, remember, there's a protective order on the discovery, and they're not allowed to share what's in discovery with the public or, with anybody outside the case. They're precautionary. Now, they might get lifted, and defense makes sure to include in a footnote here that they see no reason why the information about the warrants cannot be made public, which tells me it's pretty obvious that they were for Daniel Richmond's phone, his computer, maybe hard drives, email accounts, those things. Things you can pretty reasonably deduce they would be for. The search warrants appear to be against Richmond, of course, person 3, and covered from 2016 to 2019. That's how I read these sentences here, although there's a redacted sentence here at the end of it. But this is 3 years prior to Comey testifying. So it's a bit weird to me that this is where that these warrants covered that time period. A filter team previously went through the material, and Richmond was involved, given the opportunity to assert privilege, but Comey was not part of that. There's a short sentence here that's redacted, and I wonder what it says. I'm thinking it may say something about Mr. Fitzgerald not being involved, who's Comey's current counsel. But I'm not positive, and I don't know why that would be redacted. It says, Mr. Richmond is an attorney who represented Mr. Comey beginning in May 2017, in addition to other clients, period. Very short sentence, period. Then Mr. Richmond also had sensitive and private materials belonging to his students within the seized materials. Maybe it says Mr. Richmond served as a special government employee, but I think that's already public. It's already public, but I think it's already public in one of the filings. I'm not sure. Another thing that's really interesting in the filing. It is unclear whether the government intends to search only the materials marked responsive by the U.S. Attorney for the District of D.C., that team that the Arctic Haze warrants came from and that authorized them to seize, or if the government intends to review both responsive and non-responsive materials from Arctic Haze warrants, i.e. the full raw returns. The government declined to answer the defense request for more information on this. So is there something specific in these search warrants and that material that they want to look at? Or are they just wanting to look at everything and hoping to find something? Prosecutors haven't obtained search warrants in connection with this case, this current case. And they haven't sought authorization for a search of the Arctic Haze materials for evidence of the 2 offenses with which Mr. Comey is charged. Like, why didn't they do this before? When Mr. Comey fell under investigation this summer for the offenses that are charged here, why didn't the government seek court authorization to look at the Arctic materials then? Why are they now going after them? See, this is another reason why my working theory regarding this case against James Comey is that it is not about getting James Comey. It's about getting at classified and sealed materials. I think it's about the 1A package and the Durham memo that are from the Tropic Haze investigation, which all of these leak investigations are connected, which is strange. We got one person charged here, Comey, but all the leak investigations are connected. The stuff that is behind the redaction blocks in the declassified memos from the summer, I think, is also what this case is about. And I think it's about another case, possibly the case that we recently learned is being built in Florida, in which there's 2 grand juries that have been impaneled for. And those 2 grand juries were impaneled, or the order, should say, the order to impanel 2 grand juries in the Southern District of Florida came down a day after the Comey indictment did. Comey was indicted on September 25th. These 2 grand juries were ordered to be impaneled this coming January on September 26th. So now that doesn't necessarily mean they're connected, but I think they are. I think this is the rumored. I'm kind of jumping ahead to a different topic I was going to talk about on the show, but whatever. There's been rumors going around that there's a grand conspiracy case being put together in Florida. And it's in Florida because that's where Trump's residence was, or is. And the conspiracy, the grand conspiracy, is because there was a grand conspiracy against Trump to deprive him of his rights and deprive all of us of our rights, in that we elected Trump in 2016, and there were individuals who sought to undermine his campaign, corruptly undermine it, and to corruptly undermine his first presidency. And that grand conspiracy continued throughout his first presidency, continued through the Biden administration, and there are many players in it. You know the suspects. And so it's a conspiracy against rights case, 18 USC 241, which is the same charge they brought against Trump in the J6 election case. Now, defense counsel thinks there may have been an oopsie here in the handling of this quarantined evidence from Arctic Haze. They believe that lead case agents got a look at some of the things that's in that evidence that they shouldn't have gotten a look at. They don't go into detail. Well, publicly, they don't tell us. But if you look right here, they got this privilege spill, which this is another thing that could make this case fall apart. But it's redacted, so we don't know everything that's here. But they say that materials produced in discovery confirm that lead case agents, redacted, may have been exposed to attorney-client privilege materials belonging to Mr. Comey. That would be a big uh-oh. The next part of the filing concisely restates the filter protocol and what it would be, and advises the defense that the defense stands ready to confer regarding the protocol if prosecutors will first identify to the defense the materials to be reviewed. Which they haven't. And it kind of at this point looks like a fishing expedition. Why, like I asked earlier, why wasn't this filter team done before they indicted Comey? They could have done that. They could have gotten court authorization to unseal. They could have, or at least asked for it. They could have asked a court to bring about a filter team. And they could have gone to Comey before he was indicted and said, hey, we want to look at this stuff. We're going to use a filter team, and you're going to get the opportunity to assert privilege over these attorney-client communications. And they could have had this battle over this evidence before indicting Comey, but they chose not to. By now, it looks like an investigation post-indictment using material from more than 5 years ago. And that material failed to find any evidence of a crime to charge Comey or Richmond with. So why do they want to look at it now? And that's really like, that's like, it's, see how, I hope that hits like how strange this is. There's this old investigation from over 5 years ago into Comey and Richmond for media leaks. A bunch of different investigators looked at it. It was connected to all these other media leak investigations that went on for years and years trying to figure out how stuff within the FBI was leaking out to the press. And the people who investigated Arctic Haze, they concluded there's nothing here to charge Comey or Richmond with. And Comey provided his iPhone. The FBI phone lines were looked at. Cell phones were looked at. All these things. They didn't find any evidence to charge either of these guys with a crime. But then, now that Comey has been indicted, years later, allegedly for false statements to Congress about this same subject matter of leaking to the press, they want to go and look at this evidence that was gathered pursuant to these 4 search warrants, even though the investigators from back then, 5 years ago, concluded that it didn't evidence any crimes committed by Richmond, person 3 in the indictment, or Comey, the defendant. Defense says the government is seeking to revive and repurpose years-old warrants from a closed investigation to conduct new searches for different crimes. We can parse that, and that different crimes part really catches my eye. Now, Comey's team, let's say this plays out, which I think it will. This is going to happen. I don't think this is going to get shut. I don't think this is going to get shut down. I think there's going to be a filter team, and they're going to look at this quarantined evidence, and Comey's going to assert privilege over some of it. And at some point, we may see a move to suppress this evidence. But I do think we're going to go down this road, and I think we're supposed to. I think that's the reason why Comey was indicted, to generate a legal cause, to go after this court-sealed material, because I think it's for different crimes. The Arctic Haze warrants, I almost said the warrants. The Arctic Haze warrants, by their express terms, do not authorize the government to conduct the searches it now seeks. Now, that's kind of strange, I think. The Arctic Haze warrants targeted only alleged violations of redacted. The government now proposes to use those warrants to search for evidence of different crimes that arose from a proceeding that occurred after those warrants were obtained. The Fourth Amendment forbids this expansion without a cause. The Arctic Haze warrant sought increasingly granular details or attempted to address potential gaps in the collection, yet the government ultimately determined that the evidence was insufficient to proceed with any charges. Again, defense wants to challenge the warrants first and then go on to dealing with the protocol. The court, they argue, should deny the government's motion to implement its proposed filter protocol without prejudice and direct the government to disclose the following information. Only with these disclosures can the court determine the legal validity of the proposed searches and assess any proposed filter process. One, they want the legal authority for the contemplated review. What is the legal authority that allows for this review of that evidence to occur? Two, whether any quarantine materials have been accessed by, shared with, or provided to the case team that's doing the investigation now, which, as I said earlier, the investigation should have been done before the indictment. Three, the protocol used during the prior filter review, including search parameters, segregation measures, privilege determinations, and associated logs or correspondence. Four, whether the government intends to search raw returns or only set the already filtered information in the prior review. With the prior review, what they mean is they already had a review of this quarantine evidence with Daniel Richman, where he could assert privilege. We don't know anything about that, but we know there was a review that included him, person 3 from the indictment. 5, and this is the final one, whether non-lawyers will conduct any portion of the filter review. The filter team is comprised, it says right here, according to the government's filing, the filter team is comprised of 2 assistant United States attorneys and their support staff. Who's in the support staff, they want to know. So only with these disclosures can the court determine the legal validity of the proposed searches and assess any proposed filter process consistent with its supervisory role over privilege determinations. So this is the battle in the United States v. Comey right now. The unlawful appointment of Lindsay Halligan, I think, is the kill switch, and that's coming in November sometime. Might get delayed. There's going to be a back and forth about it. Each side's going to file their brief and probably replies and responses, and the judge will rule. And I think Halligan's appointment is going to be ruled unlawful, which will mean right now, that's what I think. Her appointment's going to be ruled unlawful, and she's going to be removed. And it's going to go down just like Alina Habba did, or similar to that, which means this indictment is it'll nullify this indictment because it will mean that Halligan didn't have the legal authority, the power to bring this indictment in the first place. But again, I don't think this is about getting Comey. I think it's about unsealing that material that is currently sealed. Find out. Hey, you guys remember this dork? That's being polite. George Santos, representative from New York, never should have been in office. Never should have been able to run for office. And never should have cast votes while representing New York. The guy was a total fraud, and he was indicted in May of 2023 for multiple fraud schemes. His history is a fraud, which he wasn't indicted for all of that, but his name's a fraud. His personality is a fraud. Everything about this guy is fake. And he ran multiple fraud schemes, which literally stole people's money straight from their credit cards, defrauded the state of New York, and defrauded the voters of New York. After being indicted about a little over a year, he pled guilty to wire fraud and to aggravated identity theft. So did his secretary for his campaign had previously, before this, pleaded guilty, I believe. And I don't remember exactly what her agreement was and what her sentence was. But in total, Santos was ordered to pay $373,000 in restitution and to forfeit over $200,000. Okay. He had one of the schemes was a party program scheme where he stole a bunch of money and pretended that his campaign had raised way more than it had. And he said that he had raised $250,000 from third-party contributors. And he did this so that he could then get a $500,000 loan. Another scheme was just straight up credit card fraud. He stole donors' credit card information and then used it to make purchases for himself. Another scheme was fraudulent political contribution solicitation scheme, where he ended up getting $25,000 transferred from contributors to his own bank account. And another one was an unemployment insurance fraud scheme that, you guessed it, was COVID related, and he fraudulently received more than $24,000 in unemployment insurance benefits. He also made false statements to the House of Representatives on stating of how much money he had earned and when he had earned it and all of these things, and none of it was true. The guy is a jackass. And he's been in prison for just a couple months. He was sentenced. Oh, now I don't even remember what his sentence was. But he wasn't sentenced to be in prison that long. I don't remember what it was. But recently, on October 17th, President Trump pardoned him. And I got nothing good to say about that. I got nothing good to say about it. After he was pardoned, Santos went on X and made a statement thanking Trump and also thanking all the people who helped him get out. And the list of people who helped Santos get a pardon is ugly, because it contains some usual suspects. It contains some people who I am not a fan of and who are part of the circus wing of the Republican Party. And that would be Lauren Boebert, Anna Paulina Luna, Matt Gaetz, and there was someone else. Oh, Marjorie Taylor Greene, who lobbied Trump in order to get Santos out of prison. And it's a big freaking circus. It's a big circus. These are the clowns in the right-wing party right now. You know, the Democrat Party has their loonies, and so do we. George Santos is one of them, and the people who jailbroke him are also some of them. Loonies on both sides. Clowns to the left of me, jokers to the right. Same thing, right? Santos, remember that restitution he's supposed to pay? You would think that if he was truly sorry for what he did, he would be interested in paying this restitution, this, what is it? Almost $600,000 of money he owes. Well, he says he's not. His sentence has been commuted, and he was supposed to serve 7 years in prison. Paid $375,000 in restitution plus $200,000 in forfeiture. He says he's not going to do that unless the law actually requires him to, now that he's been pardoned. And I don't know the ins and outs of it. Maybe he owes all this, but if he can get out of repaying what he owes, then he's going to do that because he's a fraud. He's scum. This guy is scum. He's absolutely scum. And he never, ever, ever should have been in Congress. Ever. And the people that he hurt most are the people he stole money from and the voters of New York who were robbed of their right to elect a representative that would actually represent them and who was who he said he was. There's all these people that joke about Santos, and Santos himself became a joke, but it should not be missed that the voters of New York, everyone in that election in which Santos was a candidate, was defrauded of their right to vote. They were defrauded of their representation in Congress. And I just don't have anything good to say about Trump pardoning this scumbag. I don't know why he did it. I just don't. It's completely lost on me why he did it. So if you think you know, if you think that you figured out why Trump pardoned this guy, leave me a comment and clue me in. I would love to better understand it. But for now, it's firmly in the category of Trump. WTF, man. WTF. Okay, we have a Trump fake news story to pick apart. And I love doing this. I don't do it that often. Recently, we've been covering a lot of court cases on the episodes, but And in my upcoming episode, number 350, I'm going to be going through two stories where Trump is addressing some fake news, or there's fake news around a decision or thing Trump said, and it's worth picking apart. So what it starts off, there's a Wall Street Journal story about about America approving the use of some long-range missiles by Ukraine, which Ukraine recently used to attack deeper into Russia than they have previously. And preceding this news in this Wall Street Journal story was talk of the U.S. possibly providing Ukraine with Tomahawk cruise missiles, which are some of the greatest military inventions in the history of military inventions. They're incredible. And if the U.S. were to supply Tomahawk missiles to Ukraine, it would absolutely change the war. It's possibly the most significant weapon that we could provide them, as far as as far as a drastic effect it would have. It would immediately enable them, if they knew how to use them and had the equipment to do so and the signal intelligence to do so, which those are all big factors. But assuming they had all of that they would need to go along with the Tomahawk cruise missile, the war would very, very quickly end, because they would be able to strike almost anywhere in Russia. So that was in the news prior, whether or not the U.S. would approve, and there had been talk of the U.S. approving Tomahawk missiles for Ukraine, and that was kind of shot down in a news conference by Trump. And Trump, no, we can't provide them to them. They don't know how to use them. It'd take them 6 months to learn how to use them, and they'd have to have all this other equipment to learn how to use them and be able to use them. So it's just not a thing that's going to happen, because I'm going to end the war before then. Then, not too long after, Ukraine did strike into Russia with longer range missiles than they've ever used before. And the Wall Street Journal wrote a story saying that they had done so with U.S. approval. Trump took to Truth Social to state that the Wall Street Journal story on the USA's approval of Ukraine being allowed to use long-range missiles deep into Russia is fake news. The U.S. has nothing to do with those missiles, wherever they may come from, or what Ukraine does with them. Okay, now as a longtime Trump fan and news commenter, I'm going to point out to you that there is a tell in here, like a tell from a card player or a tell from a performer. There's a tell in here that there's more going on here with this statement than superficially what you would take it as. Is superficially, the initial take is Trump is calling the Wall Street Journal fake news, and what they said must not be true. It must be fake. But do you see the line, wherever they may come from? That aside, that phrase in there tells you something. Trump is being very careful with the second sentence here, okay? And I'm going to show you. What he's talking about are what the actual missiles are. They are Storm Shadows. And Storm Shadows are made by the UK and were provided to Ukraine by the UK. So when he says the US has nothing to do with those missiles, he's right. When he says wherever they may come from, he's saying they came from somewhere, not us. These are Storm Shadows, or the carrier form of them. And those are the missiles that Ukraine recently used to conduct this deeper, long-range strike into Russia. And the role that the U.S. has with this is not zero. It's not zero. Alexis Grinkovich is the NATO commander who approved this strike. And recently, authority for whether or not Ukraine was able to strike into Russia, that authority, that permission-granting authority, was set with Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth. He approved or disapproved of Ukraine's request for strikes into Russia. Recently, that authority was transferred to NATO commander Alexis Grinkovich. Alexis Grinkovich is also the top U.S. general in Europe. He's American. So the tie-in is that it was an American U.S., it was a U.S. general who approved these strikes, but he's also the NATO commander. So it's not U.S. approval, it's NATO approval. A distinction without a difference? You be the judge. Now, why do they need our permission? Why is it a thing even that Ukraine seeks permission from at one time Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth or from this NATO commander? What is this permission thing that Ukraine needs in order to use these missiles to strike at Russia? Well, the reason is the U.S. provides the targeting data. Ukraine doesn't have the capability to dial in these long-range attacks. They need our signals intelligence. They need information from our satellites, from our SIGINT aircraft in order to conduct any strike like this. And so when they say granting authority, it's permission to receive the targeting data from the U.S. So it cannot be said, not honestly, that the U.S. had nothing to do with this strike. But that's not what Trump said. Trump said the U.S. had nothing to do with those missiles, wherever they may come from, or what Ukraine does with them. You see the funny game he's playing? That's why it's fake news. The headline of the story is what Trump is calling out here. It's that headline that he didn't like. U.S. lifts key restriction on Ukraine's use of Western long-range missiles. He didn't really like that headline, and he chose an opportunity to call the Wall Street Journal fake news, which he always likes calling any media fake news, right? But it kind of is fake news. You have to read into the story to actually get a more accurate impression. But there's another thing going on here with Trump. At the same time this happened, the same time these strikes happened, what was the date on this article? This article is October 22nd. Do you know what also happened on October 22nd? The Treasury announced that they were imposing further sanctions on Russia. Now, we already have a whole bunch of swamp draining, swamp fighting, military equipment, and energy sanctions on Russia, and have had. And those sanctions are causing a lot of harm to Russia. But these are the most significant sanctions to date. These are against the two largest oil companies in Russia, Rosneft and the other name just escaped my brain. Rosneft is number one. What was the other one? Is it Lukoil? Yeah, that's it. Rosneft and Lukoil. So these sanctions, and there's other things in here too. All of these, all the subsidiaries, all this stuff, the refineries. This is going to have a massive impact on Russia and their ability to prosecute the war, their ability to move gas and diesel and these other things to their citizens and to the war effort, heating oil, winter's coming up, all of those things. And Russia is already suffering monetarily because the U.S. has been pressuring other partners, such as India, to stop buying oil from Russia, and pressuring Europe to stop buying oil and gas from Russia because that money is being used to fund the war in Ukraine. So notice what's happening. Trump here is taking a stand, or taking a narrative stance, or trying to paint a narrative picture. I didn't approve those strikes. The U.S. didn't approve those strikes. We didn't have anything to do with those missiles that just hit deep into Russia and did great harm. But at the same time, we issued on the very same day the most severe sanctions against Russia to date. And I really like what the account Unseen One said. Only a student of Sun Tzu can be effective as both a peace president and a war president at the same time. And that is what you see playing out right here. That's exactly what you see playing out in this little post right here. And I love these moments with Trump because there's the not cheap, there's the performative narrative, the performative theater and kayfabe that he engages in on one hand and gets a lot of attention from midwits. Then there's the more sophisticated action here. And the more sophisticated action with the providing of, the changing of who the authority over to the NATO commander, and then the providing the targeting data to Ukraine. And who doesn't miss out on this, who doesn't read this storyline right here and get caught up in the, fake news and the midwit, reactionary, emotional dunking, online monkey brain dunking. The person who doesn't get caught up in that is Putin, who knows that his war effort is not going well and knows that, I think by now, realizes he should have taken the deal in Alaska. He should have complied with Trump's request back in a month ago or so in Alaska. Because everybody who's done, if you've studied Trump and you've studied the deals he's done, the first deal Trump offers you is the best deal he's going to offer you. Every deal after that is going to be worse for you and better for him and his partners. That's what you're watching happen now. All right, before I get to the very last thing on the show, I just want to remind everybody that all of my links for where to follow me are right here in my link tree. You'll find it in the description of the show. You'll also find it in my profile, wherever you're listening or watching this. And I would appreciate your following all these places. Find the best place to watch me, whether it's Rumble, Substack, YouTube, or X. My YouTube is doing pretty good. I'm really happy to have gained all these followers. I need to hit 500. That's one of the qualifiers to monetize on YouTube, is I need 500 subscribers. And then I have to have so many watch hours built up in order to qualify. And so I'm going to go live soon. I'm not sure exactly when, but here very soon, you're going to see me do a test live episode where I'll hit my mic just like I did there. And I'll do other very pro things. And I'll be super pro, I promise. And I'm hoping you guys can join me. So I'll try to advertise ahead of time. Hey, at this time I'm going to go live. It'll be a test live. I haven't streamed live in a while. Come and ask questions, leave your comments, suggest things for me to cover. Let me know your thoughts on the topics that I cover the most, and let's hang out. So be watching for that. I'm thinking within the week I'm going to do this. It just kind of depends on when there's a good occasion for it. And one occasion that's caught my eye is Jack Smith volunteering to sit before Congress for a transcribed and televised hearing. And I think live coverage of Jack Smith in front of Congress might be a really good thing for me to go live and cover. I can't promise I can do that because the date and time of this isn't set yet, and I may have some responsibilities with the kids or something. But if at all possible, I want to go live for Special Counsel Jack Smith testifying and cover that with you guys. But before I do that, I need to do a test stream. So be watching for that. So thank you to everybody who subscribed over at Just Human. Hit the notification bell and let me know your thoughts on my short videos over there and on my long form videos. Thank you to everybody who watches on Rumble. Most of all, thank you to everybody who supports the show by being a paid subscriber at justhuman.substack.com. $7 a month over there keeps me caffeinated and keeps me buying documents off of Pacer and covering all these topics for you. And if you don't subscribe on justhuman.substack.com, but you like to support me through purchases at Benson Honey Farms or bootleg products or straight up just buying me coffee at ko-fi.com or Manly Cans purchases, merch or Venmo, thank you. Really appreciate it. At the end of the day, being a content creator, such that I am, requires some support. The numbers have to make sense at the end of the day, right? And you guys make it make sense for me to keep doing this. And I can't thank you enough because I'm passionate about this. I have fun with it. Sometimes it feels like work, but about 80% of the time it feels like play. And I hope that comes across in the subjects I cover, even if one of them is Santos getting a pardon. All right, last thing I wanted to bring up. This will be quick. So back on April 24th of this year, Trump ordered an investigation of foreign contributions into American elections. And it specifically, his order brought up Act Blue. And he told the AG he wanted a report. He wanted a report on foreign contributions in American elections. That report was due 180 days after the signing of this executive order, which meant that it was due on October 21st. I haven't seen anything published yet, but this is one of the things I'm watching for, is a report in response to this. Now, it doesn't say 180 days after this executive order or presidential action, I should say. It doesn't say it has to be made public then. It says that within 180 days, he wants a report on this subject on his desk. It may have been done 30 days later. It may have finished October 21st. It might have been that she went to him in private and said, we can't finish this because of the government shutdown. It could be that she said, Mr. President, we need more time. It turns out to be more interesting than we thought. I don't know. But I'm watching for AG Bondi's report. And I think there will be one. And it should be really interesting because, as we all know, there are a number of foreign contributions finding their way into American elections and influencing our politics. I'm also watching for anything that appears to be as a consequence of this. So, news about Open Society or George Soros Foundation, news about various groups not contributing as much. Like we're about to get into this, we're getting into the season for Democrats and Republicans to start fundraising and building their campaign for the 2026 midterms. And it'll be interesting to see how many of them can trace their funding to straw donors or foreign connections. Maybe there won't be as many because now there's a microscope on those things, which is in other words, I'm looking for the outline or the impressions left by the AG looking into this subject. Watch for it. Okay. So that's the end of the episode. I hope you guys like what I've been doing with the shorter videos and then releasing a larger, the full episode of the Just Human show or whatever. All right. It stopped raining. One of my dogs is missing. I've got Hercules back here. Let's see if you can see him. There he is. What are you doing, Hercules? What are you doing, Hercules? It stopped raining, so I think I'm going to take them outside and see if I can get them to run around and play a little bit, slip and slide on the trampoline. And I know he's going back to sleep. It's a sleepy, rainy day at the human house. Eyes shut. He's going back. I think Athena must be upstairs. She's got I think I may have said this before. I don't remember. We have like an ottoman or whatever that came with one of our couches. We have one couch that came with our couch that's in the sunroom, but then we have the ottoman that came with it. We couldn't make the feng shui of the sunroom work with the ottoman and the couch, and then also the coffee table we bought for that room. So we put the ottoman, we moved it to out of the way to a different area, and it's Athena's specific, it's her spot. And so we ended up moving it by a dining room window, and it looks just fine right there. And she approves of it because that is her. If she's not next to you, that's where she is. She's on that ottoman and she's napping, or she's watching outside the window and monitoring the neighborhood for cats and other animals and delivery men, Uber drivers. So I imagine that's where she is. All right. God bless each and every one of you. Thank you for your support. Thank you for liking and subscribing. Stay human, and I'll see you on the next one.